Welcome in, everyone. RFK Refugees Podcast. Ted here. John is not here. It is just me here to eat our vegetables. I guess we're not gonna have the joy of a win. It's just me. So I'm gonna do my best to carry the show because you guys deserve a podcast. You guys deserve to hear our thoughts. Yeah, John, feeling a little bit under the weather. I'm also traveling as he does. So just unable to really make it to the show today. So you get me. So some of you, that might mean you turn off the show and don't listen. That's fine. I understand it. I get it. But for others, this will be a show for you. We got some listener questions. Tried to solicit the best I can. Give you a little bit of thoughts on the DC game. I won't be providing much on the Spirit game. I really haven't had a good opportunity to watch it. So I'm gonna table that a 2-0 loss for them. A team that's still injured, that's still trying to get themselves together. So if you're here for Spirit content, you can go ahead. I'm not gonna let you sit through all the DC content and then switch it off. So and I understand and I apologize. We'll work to always be better. Be better next week. We want to start because we want to start a little bit off topic with DC United, since we did get a listener question about this, and I feel obligated to answer this. If you haven't seen the news, and this is relevant to me considering my area here in the Richmond area, and went to a Richmond Kickers game and had a lot of fun. 5,000 fans in Richmond at the game. Saw a beautiful half field goal. So maybe I should just talk about that, and that would be more enjoyable than talking about DC United today. But the most significant part of the news is that the USL has voted in a quote unquote supermajority to adopt promotion and relegation, with the addition of the Division One league slated to start in 2021. They are going to look to adopt promotion and relegation. Now, there are massive amounts of, and I think a lot of people have come on and really sort of to temper down expectations. This is not a, here's the plan for promotion and relegation, here's the set ideas of how they want to do it. It's simply saying, yeah, once we get the D1 league in there, we're going to have promotion and relegation. That all being said, there's no specific plans that have been adopted. There's no one sitting there with, this is not something that's going to come even before the World Cup comes here. It is something that I think is interesting and worth watching. This is the first time that a soccer league in America has agreed to it, and I think the USL is the perfect league for this to happen. A lot of people sort of want to either force MLS to adopt promotion and relegation or force other leagues, say they should do it. The pro rel crowd is all saying, nope, this doesn't count. We want like a true, like top down, like open system. We don't want a promotion relegation between leagues. I'm sorry to say to those people, you're never going to get that. It's never going to happen. But what can happen is what we're seeing happen right now, which is a league that is growing, around 40 or so teams, other ones coming in. The disparities as a club that played Richmond, that played in the USL Championship in D2, self-relegated down to D3. I can tell you that the difference in the style of play, I really couldn't tell you. We stopped losing a bunch of games by 5 goals or more. That last year in D2 was incredibly rough. But the overall quality, the money isn't there. And that's the only way, in my mind, you are going to get promotion and relegation, is if the money's not there, because that's how it developed in the 70s, 80s, really through the 90s. We are in America, like sports and TV has kind of been going on strong for about 50 years. In other parts of the world, and particularly in Europe, where soccer has open systems and promotion and relegation, the TV money hasn't really been there, and really TV money's been sort of a recent part of whether you agree with it or disagree with it. It is a part of soccer culture and soccer media. And so that is always going to make, when you're a new league trying to sign those contracts and have that TV money, is going to make it tough, particularly a league like MLS, to then have owners walk away from that. USL doesn't really have that sort of major money, and even then they're able to sort of kind of sell the league as kind of one package. So I think this is something that could be advantageous. They could allow them to sort of split it up, and then maybe then you can start to kind of develop those, monetary incentives for being in D1 that, I don't think it would ever get to the level of the Premier League, but I think it'll come up. I think it's with MLS, starting MLS Next Pro, there is something they need to differentiate themselves. And I think this kind of leads me into my question. This is PJ Cad says, not going to lie, it's a bit of an off-topic question. That's why I'm talking about it. This is PJ Cads over on our Discord. Something you brought up. Not going to be offended, but I'm curious if John and Ted have any insight opinion on USL voting to go pro rel. I watched a few games this weekend, and it does seem to make that league quality league more interesting. Thoughts? And I think that's that's going to be what USL is hoping for. I think the supermajority and everything else surrounding it, the teams at the bottom, like if they don't do well, they'll remain D3. So there's no risk of them dropping out. I know for a fact all the D3, all the USL League One clubs voted for this. So it would include the Richmond Kickers. I think for a lot of the D2 clubs, they look at MLS, they look at MLS Next Pro, and they see a league that is not struggling, but certainly MLS is starting to close the door. There's no more USL franchises. There's no more Orlandos. There's no more I guess St. Louis wouldn't be an example, but there's no more Portlands or Vancouvers. There's no more markets that, or Cincinnati, I guess would be the latest example of that. There's that door is closing. And so they are trying to figure out how can we survive in a market and how can we, differentiate ourselves from MLS, and promotion and relegation can do that. And I think that's really kind of what this is about. I don't think this will be they will get a massive amount of fans that will suddenly come to games and will suddenly, pique interest. But I think it will cause, when that local news story comes out that, hey, the local team in Statesboro is participating in a league that has promotion and relegation, or they hear a club has one promotion to a second division and, they spend their time, out in Europe. I think it will inevitably lead to some people coming out and wanting to check that out. Where it goes from here, where it goes, or if it takes off, who knows? We really cannot predict the future. I would say the expectations should be tempered with this. I don't think this will lead to the massive explosion, in popularity amongst the sport or anything like that. And I've always said that the pro rel argument exists in the internet, and it's where it kind of lives. People like to talk about it, but it doesn't really drive people to come out and go to games. There's a reason Lionel Messi sells out nearly every game he's in, whether he's in Jamaica or whether he's in, Atlanta. Those are the stars that drive games, and those are the players that drive games. Pro won't do that, but what I think it can do, it can make a league more interesting. And I think another thing worth watching, I was reading a story about Albany. USL, apparently they were looking at starting MLS Next Pro, and now they have sort of changed course and are looking more at USL League One. So that's going to be a story to watch. How many more markets is USL kind of able to attract of sort of those first teams that, teams like in Albany, these capital cities, Albany, I would say, is probably not a major sports franchise, but it is one that certainly is good for lower divisions, and and having that dream of saying, hey, if we can, and really selling this to their town councils, hey, let's build we only have to build a 10 to 15,000 seat stadium, or a 10,000, we can start at like a 5,000 seat stadium, and as we have room for expansion, and then if this team really takes off and it gets promoted and it gets moved up the ranks, that can bring a lot of pride to the city to watch them move up. So I think that's going to be the interesting thing to watch, is the clubs that kind of get in on that ground floor right now, that get in where they're able to have an idea of going up, and that can bring a lot more pride than just say, hey, we're going to play in MLS Next Pro, which is MLS's reserve division. So we've got New England Revolution 2 and Columbus Crew 2 on our schedule. So that, I think, will be the early stages of this. I think could be a lot of that. I think also, speaking from a USL fan, there's been a lot of frustration amongst fans that there hasn't been a lot of growth in the league, or teams are starting like Lexington, like North Carolina, and then they jump up to USL Championship. Lexington famously didn't make the playoffs, and then they moved up to USL Championship. So I think there is I think this is sort of also primed for a lot of the USL League One clubs to sort of drive more people to get invested. So if they start clubs in a couple years, they're going to stick around until 2028, until that pro rel starts, and sort of build up excitement and build around their teams. So remains to be seen. All right, let's get to the bad stuff. Let's get to DC United's 4-1 loss to Orlando City SC, playing on the road. This game, I think, represented, we had seen some sort of disappointment, I think, amongst the sort of soft schedule that this team had. Montreal, of course, firing their coach. Kansas City looking struggling. They get a win out of that. Toronto, again, not looking very good either. And of course, in Chicago, who look a little bit better than maybe they credit. So maybe that's kind of a good draw that they got out of that. But I think this game sort of represented, like, here's the first test. Can this team, show that, yes, maybe they've been playing down to some opponents, but when they get up for it, they can play up to opponents. And I think this is a task that they failed fairly miserably. This is a team, they were playing against a team that had all 3 DPs. I won't name their names, but I know that they had 3 designated players out there, and this team looked like a team that had 3 designated players out there. DC is a team in their talent level and everything else. I think they do have players that can play up and can compete against some of these better teams, but those players have to be on top of it. They have to play. They have to have a good day, and they have to have probably multiple players have a good day. When they do, you'll get some good moments. When you don't, you'll get moments like this, where if they have multiple players that are average or maybe slightly below average on the day, they're going to lose soccer games. And in this case, they lost soccer games pretty badly. Now, they were hurt, of course, by the international break. We can go into that about how MLS plays through international breaks. It's, again, a silly thing. And of course, but DC, suffered a little bit. I think we'll see maybe what happens next week if maybe that was a little bit more of a linked. They, of course, were out Matti Patola, who was with Finland. They were also without Kai Rawls, who was with Australia for the international break. So that was significant. I don't know if I can look at these players and say, oh, if those players had been available, this game would have been a lot better. But you do kind of look at particularly Boris Enow, who did not have a good game today. He was directly at fault for the second goal. And Lucas McNaughton, I thought, really didn't play well defensively and was lost in a lot of cases. And I think that's the nature of the game, how DC lost this game. The center of midfield was chasing ghosts a lot. I think really Orlando played DC very well, and I think they kind of split. They played kind of deep in sort of a press, or deep in sort of a mid block, and then when they went out, they had a lot of their attackers kind of fanning out, and sort of had to, if you are Borisino or you are Jose Kojima, you had to make a choice. Do you sort of press the ball, try to win it in that central midfield, or do you join your defenders? And that's really where they got overrun. Orlando bypassed the center of midfield consistently. They were not trying to pass through it. They tried to play very, very direct and were extremely successful to do so. That first goal was sort of a microcosm of the worst things that you will see about DC, which is they were just chasing ghosts. Kojima kind of half picks up his marker. Everybody else is kind of picking up their marker, but Kojima kind of leaves. I believe it was Muriel sort of on the header into the back of the net. I don't think he does a good job tracking back. Again, questions might be asked of Borisy now as well. It was a very much like that type of goal that kind of set the stage. It was like the really bad goal to give up. And I think the second goal was really kind of the backbreaker because it was an unforced error. Getting tripped up, not really able to really challenge the ball, and Orlando pushed through it and get a goal kind of off some sloppy defending. The third goal as well, I think we now have officially, I can claim we have a problem with Kim in goal. On set pieces, again, he gets kind of just like pushed into the net, and I don't know what it is, and I'm not sure if anyone else really noticed it. He does come out and make some good saves in this game when it was 4-0, and he kind of kept this game maybe from getting a little bit worse. But I look at that moment and I just see him kind of not really going to challenge for the ball, sort of leaving leaving Borisy now kind of hung out to dry there. And as a goalkeeper, if you have to be willing to go out and make those challenges, or be set to make those saves, and instead he kind of gets walked into the goal again, doesn't really able to make a challenge, and it's 3-0, and by then obviously the game is over. And then the last goal was just an absolute banger. Defensively, things were bad. Offensively, things were arguably worse. A lot's been made about Troy trying to get this team to play different in attack, not just to go feeding Benteke. It's looked good sometimes, and other times it hasn't looked good. And this was by far, I think, the weakest performance. DC had moments where they had possession and they were able to kind of push it through into the attack. What I think the problem is that they sort of let Orlando, sink into that mid block. And when they did that, when they didn't move the ball fast enough, when they didn't get it up quick enough, really they had no answer. Pirani, again, another poor performance from him. Not a whole lot of showing. Even Peglo, who's had some positive performances, didn't look all that good. It was just, this team just never looked comfortable. They were never really able to break Orlando down. The one opportunity they had, and this is where I would, if I'm Troy, I would say, are you really happy with this? Because they looked better. Of course, they got more attackers on there, but they were moving quicker. It was like quick options. It was shots. It was getting shots on net. And even if it was, a long range shot from Pirani towards the end of the game, at least they were doing that. They were doing none of that in the first half. They were just unable to actually generate much of a chance. And it looked like they were just trying to find that correct chance. I can understand the notion about how, he wants this team to play the ball a little more on the ground, to be a little bit more willing to pass and move, and not just be so reliant and so direct on Benteke. But at the same time, once they get into that final third, they got to figure out a way to move quicker, I think. And they've got to figure out a way to hit quick passes and, draw defenders out, because all Orlando basically had to do was sit there with their basically blocks of 4 in front of the box and block of 4 in the box. And really DC was not able to really challenge them at all. And so that's a problem. And that's something that I hope is being worked on. I hope that's going to be better. It's going to be better for this team. So, poor performance offensively. They were never really a threat. They sort of did start to threaten the ball, but it sort of came when it was already too late. They did pick up a goal from Lucas McNaughton. He gets a goal, his first goal for the team. I don't know if I can really pinpoint and say Lucas McNaughton was awful or terrible. I mean, anytime a team gives up 4 goals, they're going to be bad, but there wasn't anything specifically I thought he did that was bad. It was just, kind of an overall poor showing defensively. So it was a situation, as far as where the team goes forward, they've got Columbus coming to town. Again, a Columbus team that is very well coached, very well organized, but also a team that themselves are also struggling a little bit and not, quite at their full offensive power. They don't have Cucho out there. They're relying a lot on Russell Rowe and some other sort of, journeyman type players to sort of get their attack going. It's still going to be a tough match, and I would suffice to say, based on this performance, odds are this might be another loss for DC, and things might be going a little bit south for this team. And I think this will be on Troy to see if he can sort of pull this team out. They can kind of dust themselves off. I think maybe my hope is that this was possibly a wake-up call. I know we know how tough everything is, but maybe when you're a team, you're kind of just taking it one game at a time. So maybe this was hey, look how well we played these last few games. Oh, now we're in front of a real opponent. Okay, now we need to be better. A lot of talks about Pirani. I'll get to questions now. This is the real Koopa Troop says, if Pirani is to be benched, who claims his spot? Do you switch formations, or could you ask the same of you now as well? I do not think you're going to see this team change formation. The problem with this team right now is I do not think there is a configuration, and there is nobody that's really stepping up. And I know people will point to Jared Stroud was somebody who's talked about a lot, and he was how poor he was. I honestly in the mess of the game, I really I don't think he did anything that was too terribly poor. He still tracks back a little bit better defensively. But again, there was 30 minutes, I think, of Jacob Murrell out there, and he didn't really do too much either. So I'm not sure. Like Jacob Murrell, yes, Jacob Murrell had an assist, a goal to start the game. It's been kind of quiet from him, and this is, he burst onto the scene last season as well. And we thought, oh my goodness, this guy's going to be great, and then he kind of faded again down the stretch. So kind of seeing some similar outcomes, if I'm being honest, for him. I still think he'll be first off the bench, but looking at that performance, I think Jared Stroud starts next week. And Enau might be the one player after kind of 2 poor games. Matty Patola coming back from injury. Maybe you see Patola and Kajima out there and seeing if maybe Patola can be a little bit more cleaner on the ball. I think Enau presents a lot of great abilities as far as closing down and just being able to kind of be present in that press. But he has a game like this where very much he's chasing ghosts all day, and maybe having a player like Patola can maybe change that a little bit. So we could see a change next week. Actually, it would not surprise me if we see a swap and Patola is the one starting. Again, that's probably going to depend too on what his games are. I did not look at Finland. I do not know how many minutes he has had for Finland. Maybe I can look it up real quick. Probably can't, but that would be the only other thing. Maybe he now gets another run out, and just to save Patola's legs, because obviously he's been playing sort of in the midweek, presumably for his international break. As far as Pirani goes, until Leal is healthy, I don't think Pirani will sit, and even then, I think it's questionable. And again, Leal still hasn't been able to be healthy. He's still been out. 4 games into the season, I think a lot of people are writing him off. I'm not ready to do any of that with anybody 4 games into the season. But he definitely has to be healthy, and he has to be out there before we can really start having conversations about him. I fully expect that this team is already thinking about how to potentially replace Gabriel Pirani in the summer. If I'm Ali Mackay, I basically am sticking with Pirani because that's the guy, and there isn't really anybody else on the team who can kind of fill that role. And I want to keep my powder dry for the summer and actually go for a player that will be a big time name. I understand a lot of people want a player now and want a Pirani replacement now. If that player is available and Mackay goes and Mackay's unable to go get him, that's certainly disappointing. We don't really know what that situation is. I think there's also an argument to be made that there's going to be a lot more players available potentially in the summer, and you have a bigger pecking order to choose from to sort of make that big signing. And again, the argument is, even I think if they had that, massive, DP number 10, maybe you can make an argument that they make the playoffs, but I would say it would be really nothing beyond that. So again, that's always the argument you're going to get from me with regards to what he's doing. Phantom says, "What's the panic meter at right now?" We got through the easiest portion of the schedule, and then got stomped in the first in-form offense we faced. Quibble if you want. Did Orlando game impact your expectations at all of the team? Panic meter. It's one game, and you're always going to see games that are poor. There's going to be always an overreaction. I am curious to see how this team responds when they come home. I think maybe it was kind of appropriate for them to get kind of punished in some of these situations and kind of see how these guys respond to it. They did walk through an easy schedule. They probably thought they played a tough game, and then now it's kind of like you get that one moment. Again, it's on the road, so it's not the most horrible thing in the world. But getting beat like that can sometimes wake a team up. And with Columbus coming to town back in front of fans at Audi Field, maybe that gets this team up. So panic meter, I'm kind of right where I am with this team. It's a disappointing sort of first result. You would have liked to see a little bit more, but I think at the end of the day, it's one game, and things fluctuate so much in this league, and so I'm curious to see kind of how this team responds and how they look forward over the next couple games. It didn't really impact my expectations. A team like this, when you have DPs that are on fire, Orlando's consistently been a well-coached team. They've been a well-organized team. They are a team that has built themselves up properly. They haven't had to do these sort of teardowns and rebuilds. So that's going to mean they are a team that's more comfortable with each other. So I think London, kind of the same question. What are our expectations now? The expectations are changing for me. I think I'm kind of right where I am with this team. I think they will be, maybe competing for that playoff spot. I think they're going to make some additions in the summer. I think they've done enough to bring in some talent that they can at least be competitive sort of around the fringes. And then the hope is that you get that sort of maybe big name DP where you bring in that player in the summer that can really be maybe a difference maker and maybe push expectations a little more ahead. Sabatis over at Blue Sky says, should DC try to play some Benny ball? When thoroughly outclassed like this here in the apparatus, you need DPs to succeed in this league, knowing that DC doesn't really have any felt really on the nose. I don't know what Troy's leash is, and that's really going to be the question. If right now, I think his leash is still pretty long. I think a lot of these next few weeks, if he can't put together, a win against a conference opponent, I think is going to be big. Just getting a win against a conference opponent. He's right now his only win. This team is still winless against teams within their conference. Their only win has come against a team outside of their conference. You need to win conference games. Those are the big ones. Those are the ones that impact your playoff picture. I don't know if I think some people are talking about how maybe they need to abandon what they're doing. I think you do need to kind of see this out. I think you need to recognize that there are still some talent deficiencies on this team. And I think you're going to struggle because you have that. And I think your goal should be to be developing that framework and not just like saying like, screw it, we just need to go win. Let's just go, long ball to Benteke all day. Because then you are not getting your team comfortable. And then when you bring in those big name players, which again, I think DC does intend to do, I think it's just they didn't want to do it right now in the winter window where they, would either have a limited selection or would have to, potentially overpay or what have you for a player. And again, it's a team, again, they're not, regardless of what moves they make, they are a team that I do not think will compete, and they still have had to dig themselves out. So I understand the frustration of fans that they're being asked to wait longer. I get it. I understand it. Like conversations with people who are longtime DC fans about their frustrations, and I understand it. I do think that if you would just abandon how you're going to play this week and you just say, forget it, we need to save a job. Now, if we're going into, May, June, and, bottom feeding club, and, maybe Troy's seat gets a little bit hot, Benteke gets unhappy, maybe you do see that change. And maybe that's kind of the desperation of just like, we need to start putting some games together. But I think right now, the goal is not to see this out. I think the goal is you might see some changes in how they play, but I think they're still going to try to build something that's successful without sort of break glass and play long to Benteke or, smother the game or try to take it out. I think you might see them change up, try some different things. Maybe they're working on some of those in training. If you need some time to really see if this is going to work out and to really understand if this is going to be something that is good. You can't just, say, screw it, 4 games in, we're just going to go back to what we do. I don't think that's a recipe for success. It's exactly what has gotten DC in trouble when they commit to something and then abandon it, after 6 months. And I think what you're seeing from Ali Mackay, what you're seeing from Troy Lesane is, no, we're going to, actually sit and let things develop. There are plenty of teams where it looks like they look really bad, but people talk about that thing they're working on. They finally get it figured out, and suddenly they start playing a lot better. RJN, how long would you give Gabriel Prani before he gets sat down and see what other players can do? Again, I think as I talked about, the problem is what other players grip. You've got Randall Leal. He's been hurt. I think if Randall Leal was healthy, I think maybe you would see him out there and maybe seeing what he can do. That is the one player that is going to make that is gonna sort of make that switch. I think we've seen a little bit of Barajas. He's looked interesting, but maybe not, completely there. And then you have Rita Zohir, who is a fine person, I'm sure, but is not a locked in starter for this team, and certainly not a player that I don't think can be an elite number 10. So, lack of a better word, you're stuck with Pirani. And he's going to have moments like this where he might look okay, and moments like today where he doesn't look effective at all. And then also asking about Enau. I think Enau could be the one switch next week. I think maybe I'm a big Matty Patola person. I think he could be really, really good for this team. I don't know if you see maybe him try to put Matty and Boris Enau together. I think the problem with that is that you then lose a little bit with Kojima. But Kojima wasn't great in this game, but I do think if you're going to put Boris Enau and Matty Patola together, you're going to miss a lot out in sort of offensive production and ability to sort of progress the ball. Brendan Cartwright, I think a pretty good question. We're still still pretty early days, but we're getting more data. How are you feeling about Ali Mackay's international talent identification? And if they fit Troy's plan, how are we feeling about Troy's plan? I think the players right now do fit Troy's plan. The motion by which they have sort of played to that left side and played David Schnegg sort of up high is to sort of give a player to kind of connect with Peglo. I think with any international signing, and what you always have to remember about MLS is you're going to make swings, and any transfer team, any team, you make transfers, you're going to have swings, you're going to have misses. Every single front office, regardless of how good they are, is going to have some swings that work and then things that don't work out. LA Galaxy, chief and point. They've got Marco Royce. They took a big swing with him and a big miss, and he's been fairly poor for the LA Galaxy. Same with Cincinnati and their defender, who, maybe was okay, but not great. And then, of course, gets knocked out by a UFC fighter or something and gets his contract canceled. So, all front offices are going to miss. I think so far with his talent identification, I think I do look at the players that he's brought in, and you can see the role that they bring in. You see what they see on the field, and you at least say, okay, clearly this guy's been brought in to perform this role. This isn't just throwing players into the mix and seeing what they can do. This feels like a team developing a very much a coherent plan around it. Regardless of how it works, some of these might not work. Pirani might be the one that's looking like it's not going to work. Boris Enau had some good moments in the beginning of the season and some not so good moments. So, been kind of a mixed bag for him. Patola, I thought, struggled a little bit at the beginning of the year, but had, a little bit better to the end of the year. And I think he's looked good coming in off the bench so far. So I think maybe you'll see him get a moment to shine. Kai Rawls had some shaky moments in the beginning, but I think overall has been pretty much as good as advertised. And Kim Jung Hong is a young goalkeeper, so it's going to take a while for those types of things to develop. I think the biggest thing, I think right now with any of these players, and with in fact we're only 2 years into it, it's going to take some time to really sort of develop that. I think we're starting to get some little more assessment on players that have been brought in, last year, and that sort of stuck around last year, because a lot of them he brought in were just kind of like, I just need to fill the roster with some guys, and they're going to be gone by the end of the year. You look at Christopher McVeigh, you look at Alex Bono, I guess, really wasn't brought in by him, but those types of players. I think you have to look at, again, his talent identification within MLS has been pretty good. Bartlett's been fairly good, I'd say. Herrera has been really good. David Schnegg, I think, had a rough couple of games in the beginning, coming back, and has looked pretty decent. I think Baji's been, when he's come off the bench, he's really performed a role and done it pretty well. So, it's a mixed bag. There hasn't been a player he's brought in that you can say has been super fantastic. That's blown the pages away. Again, I'd also make the argument he hasn't signed a designated player. The only designated players he's had under his tenure have been Christian Benteke and Matthias Klick, both players he had no role in signing. He was not a part of the front office when he signed. So I think that's going to be the real test when you're signing players that you're trying to fit under a cap. They are by definition not going to be elite players. Your hope is that you get, they're able to sort of play above their contract and they're able to sort of play above their worth and their value. And I think he's found some decent players. Peglo has been maybe the one that's looked the best sort of coming out and sort of hitting the ground running. Other ones have been a little more uneven, but that's to be expected when that's the type of money you're throwing around. I think the real test is going to be, what is that first designated player that he brings in, that guy that says, here's the guy that's going to be the difference maker on this team. Here's the guy that's going to be the big time player that's going to sort of take us to that next level. And we'll see if that happens in the summer or if it happens in the winter. I'm leaning more towards with how they've built up their roster build that this could be happening in the summer. And Troy's plan, I think Troy's trying to get the team to play differently. I think that's going to take some time. We'll see kind of how this develops. And, coaches are worth to maybe shift some things around, try to change it. I think even in that loss to Orlando, they did a good job of sort of progressing the ball kind of up the field and getting it into that final third spot. It's just a matter of they need the players to do a better job of being quick and decisive and maybe making a pass or sort of figuring out a way to sort of pull a defender sort of out of that block and sort of opening up space sort of behind them. And that's what they were unable to do. But they have had moments where they've done that very, very well against other teams. So we'll see kind of how things develop over the next few weeks. Todd Dodge over on Facebook. Last question of the day. What statement best depicts DCU's current form? 1 loss in 5 games, 1 win in 5 games, and we tied 60% of our games. I'm gonna go with the tie 60%. I think the amount of draws this team has, particularly amongst that weak schedule, will be kind of the story of it right now. 1 win out of 5 games certainly describes it, but it sort of leaves out the fact that they have picked up some points. Yeah, that's what I got for that. All right, folks, I think that's going to do it. That's all I have for this game. Again, apologies for the shorter episode, but we will be back next week. Full show, full live. John will be here. I'll be here. Everybody will be here. Talk to you later.